just been really reflecting on how sacred and how precious the time is when we get to be together in worship and when we truly get to ponder on the messages and the words of God and what they mean for us today. I hope that you are hungry for more of who God is and what God might want to say to you this evening. But about a week ago, I was in a little town called Kingdom City. And has anybody ever been to Kingdom City, Missouri? It has 132 population of 132 people. I was spending the night there because there were no hotel rooms in Columbia, Missouri for that weekend. And we were hungry, and my traveling companions and I looked up a restaurant, and we found one restaurant in Kingdom City called the Banded Rooster, and it was some bar. And we were like, but we were hungry, so we went to this place, and this is when my expectations were very, very low. I mean, it's a hole-in-the-wall kind of place. Anybody ever gone to a hole-in-the-wall kind of place, and your expectations are low, and you hope that it's sanitary, or whatever your judgments are going on in your mind, right? This food was I've traveled the world. This food is in my top 5. It was so good. Like, it was so, so good. I know. And so I bring that up because today we're going to talk about how things aren't always the way that they seem, right? Like, it seemed one way when we were going in, but then in this particular case, we were delightfully surprised, and it was really, really good. There are some good chefs. Out of those 132 people, 1 or 2 or many of them are really good chefs in Kingdom City, Missouri. It's real. So if you ever go, yeah, Kingdom City. But this is one of those things about I think that often distinguishes people of faith from people who aren't people of faith is this idea that there is more than what we can see. There is more happening, more going on underneath the surface. Whether we're able-bodied with our eyes or not only what we see, but what we can perceive around us through our senses, right? Like, there is something more happening. So we're going to talk in this new kind of time of teaching about the exciting things that are going on underneath the surface that we don't always see. And I want to bring us to Luke chapter 20. And we're going to start with verses 1 through, it's just going to be 1 through 8. And I'll go ahead and read this for us. So it says, one day, as Jesus was teaching the people in the temple courts and proclaiming the good news, what were the 2 things Jesus was doing that day? Teaching the people and proclaiming the good news. He's doing something really amazing. It goes on to say, the chief priests and the teachers of the law, together with the elders, came up to him. And then they said, tell us by what authority you are doing these things, they said. Who gave you this authority? So I want to pause right here and I want to set the scene a little bit. Jesus is teaching in Jerusalem in the temple. That is not his usual place to teach. Most or a large portion of Jesus' ministry happened in the region of Galilee, where he was from. He started where he was from. He went from town to town, village to village. He crossed the Sea of Galilee, venture out, go back. But his home base was Capernaum in Galilee. He didn't venture over to Jerusalem very many times, and when he did, it was very, very intentional. And Jerusalem then was like the big town. It was like the New York City. It was the Mecca, the epicenter of this culture and this religion. This is where the religious elite and the religious powerful were. Galilee, where Jesus was from, is kind of like backwoods Galilee. So here Jesus is, kind of like a backwoods Galilean rabbi who is in the temple courts in Jerusalem. And if you can imagine, too, this temple is like the source of their national pride. I mean, this thing is like gigantic and immaculate, and there's gold, and there, just imagine just the enormity and the grandiosity of this. This is the pride of their religion, is this temple. So he's in the temple courts, this backwoods Galilee rabbi who's started to gain quite a name for himself because, for a lot of reasons, but people are really starting to take notice of Jesus. And there he is on their turf and in their territory, where these chief priests and elders and teachers of the law, where they have official positions, they've been ordained, they've been, given all the credentials to do what they do, and he's on their turf. And so imagine when they come up to him and you've got I thought it was interesting how it said, it wasn't just like one of them, like, hey, who are you and why are you doing this? They came in as a whole gang, right? Like multiple chief priests and the elders together with the teachers of the law. So imagine this whole entire fancy pants, dressed up, religious, powerful people, right? That are coming to Jesus. And you want to say, why? Why would they all come? Why wouldn't they just kind of be like, hey, somebody go check on that guy? This is an indication that they realize that he could be somebody that could be a threat to them, right? As a matter of fact, in just the chapter before, it says that they were looking for ways to kill him because he challenged them. He challenged their spirituality, he challenged their behaviors, he challenged their leadership, he challenged their hypocrisy because they're the large and in charge people. Jesus spoke in ways that was intentionally challenging to them. So my first question is, what do you do when you're challenged? When people challenge you? Push back? Yeah. Challenge them back? Yeah. Well, all the executives are here, right? Like the CEO, the CFO, the COO, the CMO, the CRO, the C3PO, they're all there. And they wanted to gang up and squash this. That was their plan. And so when they came, they said, what authority do you have? And who gave you this authority? Because really, anybody who's important is right here, and none of us gave you this authority, right? So you can't get out of this one, Jesus. We're all here, and we didn't give you this authority. So what did it look like on the surface before we go read the end of the story? What did it look like on the surface? If you were in the crowd that day,
they were going to bring him down.
It looked like they were going to bring him down. They're large and in charge. And often in our lives, when we get kind of cornered by somebody who feels really powerful, it can seem like they're going to bring me down, right? Well, it goes on in typical rabbinic fashion. Well, before we go to the next verse, I want to kind of just tell you a little bit about this word authority first. This word authority, exousia in the Greek, it's a big deal. You have to have authority to be able to do things, and where that authority comes from matters. There's a certain pedigree that happens. And I think it's really interesting that by the time we get to this Luke chapter 20, as readers, we've already read in Luke chapter 4, the crowds were incredibly impressed with Jesus because it said he spoke with authority, not like the teachers of the law and the scribes and the religious elite. Jesus spoke with a different kind of authority. And in Luke chapter 5, he says that he wants them to know that the Son of Man has authority to forgive sins. Not just the regular kind of authority, but like the kind of authority. Who has authority to forgive sins? God alone, right? And then it says in Luke chapter 9 that Jesus had authority over unclean spirits, and that when he sent his disciples out, he gave them that authority. This kind of authority comes from where? God. So we as readers know the answer to this question. We know that Jesus' authority does not come from chief priest so-and-so or chief priest that and that. It comes from God, right? But instead of just answering the question, typical rabbinic fashion, what the rabbis usually do, Jesus answered a question with a question. Because, friends, when people already have made up in their mind something they want to prove, it's like really unlikely that any answer is going to satisfy them. You know what I mean? So this is actually practical advice we could take when someone's challenging you. Ask a question. Just going to throw that out there. That was a freebie. Okay, so it goes on. Verse 3, it says, Jesus replied, I will also ask you a question. Tell me, John's baptism, was it from heaven or of human origin? They discussed it among themselves and said, okay, guys, if we say heaven, then Jesus will ask, why didn't you believe him? But if we say of human origin, all the people will stone us because they are persuaded that John was a prophet. Does that just not reek of like political conversation? Like, are they really trying to answer the question or find the truth of the thing? No, they're just doing what's safe for them, right? So, verse 7, so they answered, we don't know where John's power came from, authority came from. And Jesus said, neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things. And in the very next sentence, he goes right on teaching. How incredible is that he could, I just want to stand in awe of like the what just happened there and how he could disarm them and expose them and send them off with just a word, with just a question, with just a simple explanation. So what is he even talking about here when he talks about John the Baptist? So John the Baptist was a troublemaker too, just like Jesus. He was Jesus' relative. And he came before Jesus. He started his ministry before Jesus. Jesus was actually one of John the Baptist's followers. Jesus entered into the baptism of John the Baptist. He had so much admiration and respect for John the Baptist. Remember the first question we talked about? Who did you have so much admiration and respect for? You're doing your work in a very similar way. Their legacy lives on through you. That's John the Baptist and Jesus. They preach the same message. Repent. The kingdom of heaven is here. He's carrying on this work that was begun by John the Baptist, and obviously doing much more. And there's a lot of talk in even the question of who's greater, Jesus or John the Baptist. And John the Baptist says, not me. Everything is about this guy Jesus. And so they're kind of cut from the same cloth in the way that they speak truth to power, that they're troublemakers, and that they're preaching the very similar message. But John the Baptist was not the Messiah, even though some people thought that he might be. And he ended up getting his head chopped off because he was a little bit too honest to a king. So when the Pharisees didn't like Jesus, they also didn't like John the Baptist, and Jesus knew that. And so he put this up against what their question to him was. And he was basically saying, John the Baptist's authority was from God, and mine is too. But instead of just saying that, he was able to quiet them in a way that sent them away. Without getting mad, without getting arrogant, without getting violent, he exposed them. And he exposed that their motives were for favor and status, and like you said, just to keep themselves safe. And they looked so, I imagine them walking away like with their tail between their legs, right? Like they looked so puny in that moment, when they looked so powerful just the moment before. They were afraid, not only of Jesus, but of the crowds. They were people that were powerful people, but they were afraid. And the comfort I find in this story is that the gentle, underneath the surface truth of the reality of the reign of God and God's power that doesn't need to get big and loud and scary and violent. That's just a reality that undergirds everything that we can see, that is more powerful than any person you will ever come up against. God is bigger. God is deeper. God is greater. These leaders that had all of these credentials and this power, not only religious power, but also state power, they can loom large on the surface, but underneath the surface, they're weak, they're afraid, and they're puny. On the surface, things can look and seem a certain way, but underneath the surface, and Jesus on the surface looks like some backwoods rabbi from Galilee, but underneath the surface, he doesn't need the support of armies behind him because he's so powerful, because he's got that authority from God. He lives and operates not out of fear, but out of the Spirit of God. So I wonder what human threats loom large for you today. Are there any people in your life or groups of people? Are there any situations that are just looming so large for you today, like those fancy pants religious leaders all dressed up? You look up and they seem so big. But underneath the surface, God reigns. God is sovereign. God cares for you. And God is still working, even if you can't see it, even if you can't feel it. That's the comfort that I get from this story. The challenge that I get from this story is this. John the Baptist was a human. Jesus was a human. But somehow, their life's work and their calling wasn't from human origin. They didn't rely on human credentials or, popularity or anything like that. It was sourced by God. And I want to ask myself, what is my source? When I wake up in the morning and I go about my day and I live out the calling of this life that God has called me to, and you don't have to be a pastor, I'm talking about all of us, right? What sources us? Are we operating out of like our self-made kind of selfishness? I'm going to be big and bad, and people challenge me, I'm going to squash them and go get, or are we operating from that quiet confidence and humility and gentleness of our faith that knows that under the surface, God has this all figured out. Under the surface, God knows what's going to happen. God can guide this whole entire cosmos, the ship that we're all on, to the place of redemption, and it's coming. I'm sitting here, relying on that. I'm not afraid. Or is that the source that I get up and do my work with and make a living with and, go to work and school and my neighborhood and, my family and all the places and operate from? Because it makes a huge, huge difference. So I would like to give you an opportunity to kind of just talk at your table. What are your thoughts about the story today? And after that, we're going to say a prayer and invite you to share in communion. So I'll get that prepared. We'll go with the kids, and if you want to just have a chance to just kind of say, yeah, here are my thoughts. Or you don't have to share. You can say, I'm still thinking.